Imagine you spent years and years studying a map just so that you could explore a city with total and complete freedom. Eventually, there will come a day where you leave your front door, you actually go outside your house, and you go to explore this city. You try and navigate your way around, but you find yourself, you keep getting lost. It's got to be a really frustrating feeling like you spent all this time trying to learn something, but you wasted it because it hasn't really given you many results. Well, that's exactly what happens with our pentatonic scale shapes. We spend all this time memorizing them, practicing them on the instrument, but when it comes to actually truly using them to make something that sounds musical, how come everything that we try and do sounds random, like unmusical and uninspiring? Why do we spend so much time learning these scale shapes all the way across the neck, only to make very little progress in making them sound like music? Well, for years and years, I felt like I was stuck with this exact same issue. I felt like my playing was just running through like weird patterns instead of creating something that sounded expressive. But after spending years teaching other guitarists and helping them overcome this exact same issue, I found that there are three big mistakes we're making with the pentatonics that keep us from unlocking the full power of the sound of the scale. So today we're going to fix these three big pentatonic issues by tackling three problems, and that's how to actually use the entire scale across the entire fretboard, how to pair notes together creatively using double stops, and finally, how to actually play melodic phrases with these pentatonic scales using our triad shapes. And again, for the third exercise, we're going to touch on triads a bit. If you want to make a year's worth of progress with the triads in just 30 days, check out my triad masterclass. There is a link to find out more in the pinned comment and description. But anyway, let's get on with the video. First, I want you to think you're driving a car. Imagine you're driving your car down the street. Most of the time, we're just going forwards. But sometimes, really importantly, we're going to have to reverse, like when we're parking or we're making a really tight turn. Imagine how frustrating it would be driving your car and navigating around somewhere if you could not reverse. It would be incredibly frustrating. Well, unfortunately, this is how most guitarists are using the pentatonic scale. We're only ever thinking about going forwards from our pentatonic shapes. We only ever move up the neck in one direction. But the thing is, music isn't linear. The best solos, they flow backwards and forwards all the time. And the players with the greatest ability to just jam and improvise on the spot, you'll look at them, you'll look at their guitar playing, and you'll see they're always moving up and down certain points. Like if you look at video of someone like Dwayne Allman playing, or Jerry Garcia, or someone like John Mayer, you'll see they're always kind of going back and forwards, up and down the neck, rather than always just progressing in one direction. So how do we fix this issue? What I want you to do is, instead of thinking about your pentatonic positions as a starting point in which you always flow upwards from, we want to think about them as a middle point, an equator in which we can find a hemisphere both below and above. So let's try this exercise to program this into our playing. We're just going to take a pentatonic scale position and look at the shape that exists above and below it. Let's take the first position of the A minor pentatonic. We know that we have this position above and this position below. So, what exercise can we do that trains us to think about how to play the scale shape underneath what we're currently playing? We're going to play this first position, but we're only going to play the E and the A strings of this current shape. Once we get to here, now we're going to play the A and the D strings of the shape underneath. So we go, and when we connect both of them together, we get, which gives us this kind of exercise that takes us backwards rather than only ever going down and forwards like this. And again, we can repeat this exercise across all the strings as well. So let's figure out how to do that. So again, we figured out how to do this. Once we get to this point on the A and the D string, we're going to go back to our original shape, our midpoint, our equator point, and play the A and the D string again. But this time, we go backwards again, and we play the D and the G string of the position below. And then we repeat the exact same process, play the D and the G of our middle point position, and then the G and the B of the lower position, and then the G and the B of our middle point position, and then the B and the high E of the position underneath. So if we combine all of this together, we get... So this is going to train you to see the fretboard as zones that connect together rather than just kind of isolated shapes. It's going to make it a lot easier to move backwards and forwards around the fretboard when you're improvising. And you want to get into the habit of exploring a shape both above and below where you're currently playing in your equator point. It's going to make it a lot easier to improvise without getting lost. If you can just deviate slightly below and then deviate slightly above, it keeps you grounded in a central position, which again makes it harder to kind of screw up those phrases and get lost and play a wrong note on the fretboard. And again, if you really want to master your pentatonic shapes all the way up and down the fretboard, I would encourage you to explore more. Don't just start with position 1 and then go backwards into 5. Try going into position 2 and then going backwards into position 1. So just do the exact same exercise where you start with the first 2 strings on the E and the A string of position 2, and then you play on the D and the A and the D strings of position 1. And so on and so on and so on. I'd encourage you to figure out how to do this for every single pentatonic position to truly expand and explore the fretboard and the pentatonic scale positions to a greater extent. Now that we've figured out how to travel in reverse a lot easier and explore more of the city, what if something still feels a bit out of place? What if the place we're exploring still feels a bit lifeless, like there's no energy, there's no character? Wouldn't it be better if the place we're exploring looked a bit nicer, sounded nicer, had a bit more buzz and excitement going on? Well, the exact same thing happens with our pentatonic scale shapes when we only ever play one note at a time. We need to start thinking about adding in some texture, right? And music sounds a lot more alive when multiple notes interact with each other rather than just playing one note at a time. Well, to fix this, we can start adding some double stops into our playing. To understand the impact that double stops have on our playing, I think we should just take a second to listen to one of the legends of the instrument, Eric Clapton. And I think it would be useful to listen to why he uses double stops in his own playing too.
If you try to play, you know, all this stuff that's like I was doing the double string stuff. It's really full, you know. And if you give me a break in a fast, you know, and I start playing single lines, it doesn't sound right. It just doesn't sound right. It sounds thin or something, or too fiddly. Explain. Well, you know, like to go. It would be okay, but it wouldn't be as good as... Really, for me anyway.
So now that we know that we want to start using double stops, how do we actually do it? Luckily, double stops are incredibly easy to add into your playing. All you have to do is just know how to play the scale shapes, but you need to change your perspective on how you look at playing the strings. So instead of just kind of running up and down the fretboard, note by note, single notes at a time, all you have to do is just pair 2 strings together. So you can try running through these pentatonic scale positions by pairing the string both that you're playing and the one underneath it or above at the same time, and it makes it so much easier to phrase with double stops. So I could play a line like, and it's just so much easier to add in those double stops and get a bit more like oomph and kind of character to my guitar playing. And again, it's really easy. All you have to do is just learn these scale shapes and just combine 2 strings together at a time. Again, you can do that with every single shape. I'd encourage you to try and practice this through all 5 positions to get a really deep understanding of how to do this all across the fretboard. But again, it's really simple. All you have to do is just pair 2 strings together. But again, it doesn't really stop there. There's no limit to how many strings you can pair together inside of a scale shape. Personally, what I like to do is pair 3 strings at a time. And you get these kind of thick, chunky, pentatonic sounding chords. Something I like to do in my playing is to arpeggiate these kind of things. and that sounds quite nice. Again, I'm thinking about pairing these notes together and making them work in unison rather than only playing one single note at a time. Adding some double stops into your playing, it instantly makes your playing sound a lot richer and fuller and more expressive. So now that we can move around the city a lot easier by navigating both forwards and backwards, and we've added a bit of life into it, a bit more buzz and character to the place, what if we still feel lost? What if we don't know where to go or why we're even heading in a certain direction? That's what happens when we have no sense of melody when we're improvising. So, if you want to start improvising melodically, think about this question for a second. Have you ever tried to improvise only to sound like you're just vomiting out random scale notes? Well, the honest answer is yes. We've all been there. I know that everyone watching has at least faced this problem at one point in their life. If you haven't faced this problem, it probably means that you don't actually know how to play any scale shapes. It's something that we all do. And it's something that every guitarist does as well. Even legends like Hendrix or Gilmour, they had to learn how to make their solos sound melodic in the first place. They weren't born geniuses. Again, this is an obstacle that every single guitarist has to overcome. The problem we have on the guitar is that it's really easy to play the notes. There's no cost to picking or fretting a note on the fretboard. Whereas if you look at other musicians that perhaps play a different instrument, sometimes there is a cost to playing a note. And usually that cost means that the musician has to pick their notes more wisely and has to be really precise about the notes they choose. So for example, singers or horn players, they're usually known for having quite good melody, right? They usually sound quite melodic and nice to listen to. And that's because there is a cost to playing their notes. They have to use their own voice. They have to breathe to produce a note. And that means that if they try and do too many notes, they're just going to kind of like collapse and completely go unconscious after running out of breath. So because of that limitation, it kind of allows them to sound more melodic. So how do we fix our problem on the guitar of just vomiting out random kind of scale notes and playing without any sense of direction whatsoever? So to sound more melodic, we need to focus on the triads. These small 3-note chords, these little shapes that are actually hiding inside of our pentatonic scales. So again, we have this first position over here, and hiding inside of this first position is a root position, minor triad. We have a root, a third, and a fifth, and that scale kind of exists all around it. So to stay kind of connected and feel like we have a sense of direction with the melodies we choose to improvise, we want to follow this formula. Think about telling a story, and a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So for the beginning of our phrase, we're just going to play any note inside of that triad. So I could play the root. And now for the middle, I can use any of the notes in the scale around that triad. And then for my ending, again, I just want to choose any note inside that triad. So if I put all of them together, and it sounds so much more structured, so much more melodic when I play with that kind of framework in mind. So again, let's try a bit more of this. Let me put a looper down and let me see how I can use the beginning, middle, and end formula over the top of this A minor chord. So let's see what we can come up with. We have the beginning like this, then middle, end. And again, it's okay to kind of hold notes, right? You don't have to feel like you're always playing. And again, by using the beginning, middle, and end formula, it gives you a place to actually end the phrase rather than just continuously vomiting till the end of time. Again, you can use any single triad note you want to start and end. I could use this here. So start, middle, end. Let's try a different triad note, right? So start, end. Again, this is really going to keep your soloing and improvisation so much more grounded to the chords that you're going to play over the top of. It's going to make you sound like you're actually playing a melody rather than just vomiting all those pentatonic notes. The thing is that there's actually triad shapes hiding in every single scale position, on every single string all the way across the fretboard. Again, this applies to both major and minor pentatonics and triads. So, if you want to make a year's worth of progress with these triads in just 30 days, check out my Triad Transformation Masterclass. Again, if you're interested, check it out quickly because the spaces are quite limited for this masterclass at the moment. You can watch this video over here to see how my students have used it to break out of pentatonic ruts and finally sound musical when improvising. You can find the link to check out the progress they made and how to get started either in the comments, in the pinned comment, or in the description as well.